Welcome to Night Whisper. Night Whisper brings you the darkest tales from the shadows. Join our community. Subscribe, leave a like, and prepare yourself for stories that will haunt your dreams. The day that my cousin Eli arrived in Colorado marked the beginning of my doubts as to whether I should have invited him to come to stay with us. I'm not kidding. I love this kid. I watched him grow from a skinny 10-year-old who was scared of his own shadow to this confident college grad with a degree in environmental science. So when he asked me for this summer to hike through the backcountry of Rocky Mountain National Park before starting his grad school program, I couldn't refuse. But as I stood in the Denver airport, watching him walk through the terminal with that backpack and that grin, I felt a lump form in my stomach. Because Eli didn't know what I knew. He didn't realize that these mountains weren't just pretty. They were hungry. I am Nathan Cole. I've been working for the U.S. Forest Service in this part of the Rocky Mountains for the past 12 years. I've been with the agency since straight out of high school, working my way up from a seasonal position on a trail crew to a permanent position as a wilderness ranger. I've seen enough in these mountains to make most people retire their hiking gear and never set foot in those kinds of terrain again. And someone has to pass them along. "Uncle Nate!" shouted Eli, dropping his backpack and running to me. I caught him in a bear hug, laughing despite my concerns. "Just Nate, kid. You're not 12 anymore." "Just force of habit," he drawled, grinning. "Christ, it's great to see you, Nick. Has it been 4 years?" "5, I corrected. Your high school graduation." Right. He grabbed his backpack and threw it over his shoulder. "So, you ready to show me what these mountains are all about?" He'd been watching YouTube videos for months now. Got all the gear, learned all about the maps, even did a course in wilderness first aid. I smiled, but it didn't make it to my eyes. YouTube videos, huh? That's good. That's a start. The drive to my cabin took around 2 hours. I live in a small area just outside of a small town named Silver Ridge. There are 800 people in Silver Ridge on a good day. I live in a cabin that's only reachable by a dirt road. There are pine trees everywhere, to the point where you can't see the sun. Jasper was waiting for us on the porch when our truck pulled up. I've got a German shepherd named Jasper. He's 8 now, but still as sharp as a razor blade. His ears stood up as our truck turned in, but he stayed put where he was beside the door. Good boy. "That's Jasper," I said as we got out. "He's friendly, but let him come to you first. He needs to get your scent." Eli nodded, holding out his hand as Jasper approached. The dog sniffed him carefully, circling once, twice, then finally wagged his tail and pressed his head against Eli's leg. "He likes you," I said. "That's good. That's important." We went inside, and I started making dinner while Eli unpacked in the guest room. I'd made his favorite, elk steaks with roasted potatoes, partly because I knew he'd appreciate it, and partly because I needed him in a good mood for what I had to tell him. We ate on the back porch, watching the sun set behind the peaks. The mountains turned gold, then pink, then deep purple, as darkness crept in. Eli was quiet for once, just taking it all in. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "It is," I agreed. "But Eli, before we head out tomorrow, there are some things you need to know." He turned to look at me, and something in my tone must have registered because his smile faded. "What kind of things?" I took a deep breath. The Rocky Mountains are old. Older than most people realize. They've been here for millions of years, and in that time, things have made their home here. Things that don't show up in any field guide or wildlife documentary. Eli laughed nervously. "You sound like those creepy stories on Reddit." "I'm serious." I held his gaze until his laughter died. "I've seen things out there, Eli. Things I can't explain. Things that nearly killed me more than once. And if you're going to hike these mountains, really hike them, not just the tourist trails, you need to know the rules." "Rules?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I'd written them down years ago, added to them as I learned more. Some came from my own experiences, some from other rangers who weren't as lucky as me, some from the old-timers in town who'd been living with these mountains their whole lives. "There are 13 rules," I said, handing him the paper. "Follow them, and you'll probably be fine. Break them and, well, let's just say the mountains have a way of collecting debts." Eli unfolded the paper, scanning the list. His expression shifted from skepticism to confusion to something that looked almost like fear. You're serious about this? Never respond to your name being called from the tree line? If Jasper won't go somewhere, neither should you? Nate, this sounds insane. I know how it sounds, but you're going to learn why every single rule matters, starting tonight. He looked up at me. Tonight? I nodded toward the window, where the last traces of sunlight were fading from the sky. Stars were beginning to emerge, scattered across the darkening canvas like diamonds on velvet. It would have been beautiful under different circumstances. First rule on that list, you see what it says? Eli glanced down at the paper. Always close the curtains before dark. Don't look outside if you hear tapping on the glass. I'm going to tell you why. When I first moved to this cabin, I was 23 and stupid. Thought I knew everything about surviving in the wilderness because I'd spent a few years working summer seasons. The locals tried to warn me, but I didn't listen. I figured they were just trying to scare the newcomer with old ghost stories. The first month was fine. Quiet, peaceful. I'd leave my curtains open at night because I loved watching the moonlight on the snow. It made me feel connected to the land, like I was part of something bigger than myself. Then one night in late October, I woke up around 3 a.m. with this feeling. You know the kind. That prickle on the back of your neck that tells you something's wrong even before your brain catches up. I opened my eyes and looked toward the window. There was a face pressed against the glass. At first, my brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a reflection. Maybe it was a branch casting a strange shadow. But branches don't have eyes, and reflections don't smile. The thing outside my window had a face that was almost human, but stretched wrong. Too long, too narrow. Its skin was pale gray, like old ash, and its eyes were completely black. No whites, no iris, just two pits of absolute darkness that seemed to drink in the moonlight. It was smiling at me. This wide, frozen smile that showed too many teeth. They were sharp, those teeth. Needle-thin and curved inward, like they were designed for holding on to things that struggled. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I just lay there, paralyzed, as it raised one long finger and tapped on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. 3 times. Then it tilted its head like it was waiting for something. I don't know what made me do it. Instinct, maybe. Or some deep, primal knowledge that our ancestors had, and we've mostly forgotten. But instead of going to the window, instead of trying to see what it was, I pulled the blanket over my head like a child and squeezed my eyes shut. The tapping continued for what felt like hours, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. Sometimes it would stop and I'd think it was over, and then it would start again. Sometimes I'd hear a soft scratching, like fingernails dragging across the pane. Once, I could have sworn I heard something that sounded almost like words, muffled, distorted, but definitely trying to speak. When the sun finally came up, I worked up the courage to look at the window. Nothing was there. But on the glass, there were smudges, oily gray smudges in the shape of fingertips. I asked around town the next day. Most people didn't want to talk about it. They'd change the subject or suddenly remember an appointment they had to get to. But old Margaret at the general store finally pulled me aside. "You saw a window watcher," she said, her voice low. "They come down from the high peaks when they're hungry. They can't come in unless you invite them. And looking at them, acknowledging them, responding to them in any way, that's an invitation. What happens if you invite them in?" She didn't answer. She just looked at me with these sad, tired eyes and said, Keep your curtains closed, boy. And whatever you do, don't tap back. I've followed that rule ever since. Every night, curtains closed before dark. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I can still hear tapping on the glass. I never look. I never respond. Eli was quiet for a long moment after I finished. The porch light cast shadows across his face, and I could see him struggling to process what I'd told him. That's creepy, he admitted. But it could have been a dream, right? Sleep paralysis or something? Or maybe some kind of animal, an owl or a raccoon. I found footprints the next morning, I interrupted, in the snow right under my window. They were humanoid, Eli. 5 toes on each foot, but the toes were too long, and they only went one direction, toward the house. No tracks leading away. He swallowed hard. Maybe someone was pranking you, hazing the new guy. Maybe. I stood up and started clearing the dishes. Or maybe these mountains are older and stranger than any of us can understand. Either way, you're going to close your curtains tonight. And if you hear tapping, you're going to stay in bed and wait for morning. That's the rule. That night, after Eli had gone to bed, I made my rounds, checked all the locks, closed all the curtains, made sure Jasper was settled on his bed by the front door. The dog had been restless all evening, his ears perking at sounds I couldn't hear. His hackles kept rising, then settling, then rising again. "Easy, boy," I murmured, scratching behind his ears. "We've got a long week ahead of us." He whined softly, then laid his head on his paws. I was almost asleep when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the ceiling and waited. Tap, tap, tap. From Eli's room, I heard the creak of bed springs. Then footsteps. I was out of bed and down the hall in seconds, catching Eli just as his hand reached for the curtain. "Don't," I hissed, grabbing his wrist. His face was pale in the darkness, his eyes wide and glassy. "There's something out there. I can hear it breathing. It's saying my name, Nate. It knows my name." "I know. Come back to bed." "But, Eli." I gripped his shoulders and forced him to look at me. This is rule number 1. The first and most important rule. Whatever's out there, it can't hurt you unless you let it. Now come back to bed. I led him to my room, and we both sat on the bed, listening to the tapping continue. It moved from window to window, circling the house. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow. Jasper was growling low in his throat, a continuous rumble that vibrated through the floor. The tapping stopped at the guest room window. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, a new sound. A wet, slithering sound, like something dragging itself across the glass. "It knows I'm not there anymore," Eli whispered. "It's looking for me." The sound moved to the next window, then the next, getting closer. It stopped outside my bedroom. Tap, tap, tap. Then a voice. Not quite human, not quite anything. A sound like dry leaves rustling, like bones grinding together, like the last breath of a dying animal. "Nathan, Eli, let me in. It's cold. So cold out here. Just let me in and I'll go away, I promise. Just open the window, just for a moment." Eli's whole body was shaking. I wrapped an arm around him and held on. "Don't listen," I said. "Don't respond, just wait." The tapping continued. The voice kept calling. Sometimes it sounded like a woman, sometimes a child. Sometimes it sounded exactly like my mother, dead these 15 years. It called me by a nickname only she had used. It knew things it couldn't possibly know. Finally, around 4 a.m., it stopped. Neither of us slept after that. When dawn broke, I let Eli check the windows. He found the smudges on every single pane of glass, gray, oily, in the shape of fingertips. "I believe you," he said quietly. "What's rule number 2? We set out just after sunrise, packs loaded with enough supplies for a week in the backcountry. Jasper trotted ahead, nose to the ground, occasionally stopping to look back and make sure we were following. The morning air was crisp and clean, smelling of pine and the faint sweetness of mountain flowers. "Rule number 2, I said as we walked. "If Jasper won't go somewhere, neither should you. He's been with me for 8 years now. He's seen things, survived things, and he's got senses we don't. He can feel when something's wrong before we even know to look for it." Eli glanced at the dog with new respect. "What's the worst thing he saved you from?" "We'll get to that. Let's just say I owe him my life more than once." The first few hours of hiking were uneventful. We followed a well-marked trail through dense pine forest, crossing streams on stepping stones and scrambling over rocky outcroppings. Eli's mood lifted as the sun climbed higher, and soon he was back to his usual chatty self, pointing out birds and identifying plants from his college courses. I let him enjoy it. The deeper we went, the less normal things would become. Around noon, we stopped for lunch by a small waterfall. The water cascaded down a rocky cliff face, filling a crystal-clear pool where I could see trout swimming in lazy circles. It was peaceful. Beautiful. I was unwrapping my sandwich when Jasper suddenly went rigid. His ears flattened against his head, and a low growl rumbled in his chest, deeper and more serious than I'd ever heard from him before. "What's wrong with him?" Eli asked. I followed Jasper's gaze to the tree line about 50 feet away. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Just shadows and branches and the normal wilderness scenery you'd expect in the Rocky Mountain backcountry. Then I noticed the elk. It was standing just inside the trees, watching us. A big bull, probably 600 or 700 pounds, with a massive rack of antlers that must have had 12 points or more. Beautiful animal, the kind of thing you'd see in a nature documentary and feel grateful to have witnessed. But something was wrong. "Eli," I said slowly, "do you remember rule number 3? He fumbled for the paper in his pocket, hands shaking as he unfolded it. "If you see wildlife that isn't moving naturally, don't approach it. Don't make eye contact. Leave the area immediately." "Good. Now tell me what's wrong with that elk." Eli studied the animal for a moment. I watched his face as realization dawned, the color draining from his cheeks, his pupils dilating with fear. "It's not breathing," he whispered. "And it's not blinking. It's not doing anything. It's just standing there, like a statue." "That's not an elk," I said. "Not anymore. Pack up. We're leaving." We gathered our things as quickly as we could, moving in the opposite direction from the creature. I kept my hand on my sidearm, but I knew it wouldn't do much good. You can't kill something that's already dead. The thing wearing the elk's body didn't follow us. It just stood there, perfectly still, watching with those glassy, unblinking eyes. But as we reached the edge of the clearing, I heard it make a sound. It laughed. Not an elk sound, not any animal sound. A human laugh. High-pitched and wrong, like someone who'd heard laughter described but never actually experienced it. The sound bounced off the rocks and trees, echoing through the forest until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. We didn't stop walking until we'd put 2 miles between us and that waterfall. "What the hell was that?" Eli demanded once we'd caught our breath. His hands were still shaking, and there was a wild look in his eyes that I recognized all too well. "We call them mimics," I said. "No one knows exactly what they are. Some kind of spirit, maybe, or something older. They take over dead animals, sometimes dead people, and wear them like suits. They can't quite get the movements right, though. Something's always off. The breathing, the blinking, the way they hold themselves. If you look close enough, you can always tell. What do they want? Company, I think. The old-timers say they're lonely. that they were once human a long time ago, but they forgot how to be. They forgot how to breathe, how to blink, how to move like living things. So they try to lure living things close enough to join them. Eli shuddered. Join them how? You don't want to know. We made camp that night on a rocky outcropping with good sightlines in every direction. I showed Eli how to set up a perimeter. Nothing fancy, just some strings with bells attached to the trees, and we built a fire in a ring of stones. So, what's rule number 4? Eli asked as we ate our freeze-dried dinner. I pointed to the radio clip to my belt. If you ever pick up a signal that's not on an official frequency, turn it off immediately. Don't listen to it. Don't try to find the source. Why? Because sometimes the mountains talk, and what they say can drive you mad. The second day of our hike took us higher into the peaks, above the tree line where the air grew thin and the wind cut like a knife. Eli was struggling with the altitude, stopping every few hundred feet to catch his breath, his face flushed and his breathing labored. We'll take it slow, I told him. No rush. The mountain will still be here tomorrow. But I was anxious to keep moving. The higher we climbed, the more exposed we were. And there were things up here that didn't venture into the lowlands, things that preferred the cold and the solitude of the high peaks. We stopped for a water break around mid-morning, perched on a boulder overlooking a vast alpine meadow. The view was stunning. Snow-capped peaks stretching to the horizon, their reflections shimmering in a crystal-clear lake far below. A golden eagle circled overhead, riding the thermal currents with effortless grace. "This is incredible," Eli breathed. "I can't believe you get to see this every day." "It's why I do this job," I admitted. "Despite everything else, these mountains are sacred. They deserve to be protected." From what? Hikers? From people who don't understand them, who treat them like a playground instead of respecting what they really are. Eli was quiet for a moment, considering this. Then he asked, "What are they really, Nate?" I thought about how to answer. "They're alive," I finally said. "Not like you and me, but alive in their own way. They remember things, they hold grudges, and they have guardians, I guess you could call them. Creatures that have been here since before humans walked the earth." "Like the mimics?" "The mimics are just the beginning." We pushed on, following a ridge that would eventually lead to a high alpine basin where I'd planned for us to spend the night. The trail was treacherous here, loose scree and sudden drop-offs, so we moved carefully, testing each foothold before committing our weight. It was just past noon when I heard it. A burst of static from my radio, followed by a voice. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? We need help. We're lost. Please, if anyone can hear this." I grabbed the radio, but before I could respond, Eli's hand shot out and covered mine. "Wait," he said. "What frequency is that?" I checked the display. My blood went cold. "It's not on any official channel," I said. "Not even close. This frequency shouldn't exist." The voice continued, desperate and pleading. "Please, we've been out here for days. There's something watching us. We can hear it at night, circling our camp. Please, someone help us." Eli's face was pale. "That sounds real, Nate. What if someone's actually in trouble?" "It's not real." I turned off the radio. "Trust me." "But, Eli, listen to me." I grabbed his shoulders and forced him to meet my eyes. 3 years ago, a ranger named Doug Mercer picked up a signal just like that one. A woman's voice crying for help, saying she was lost somewhere in the high peaks. Doug was a good man, experienced. He'd been working these mountains almost as long as me, knew them better than anyone. What happened? He went looking for her, followed the signal deeper and deeper into the backcountry, into places that weren't on any map. He stopped checking in after the second day. We sent search parties, but he kept moving, always just out of reach. It was like something was leading him in circles. I paused, remembering. Even now, years later, it was hard to talk about. We found him a week later, sitting on a ledge about 2,000 feet up a cliff face. No climbing gear, no supplies, no explanation for how he got up there. He should have been dead, from exposure if nothing else. But he was alive, if you could call it that. Was he okay? I shook my head slowly. He wasn't anything anymore. His body was there, but Doug was gone. He just sat there, staring at nothing, mumbling numbers and coordinates that didn't make sense. He'd carved symbols into his arms with his own fingernails, strange geometric patterns that didn't match anything in any book. When we tried to help him down, he screamed, just screamed and screamed until we had to sedate him. Jesus. He's in a care facility now, hasn't spoken a coherent word in 3 years. Whatever that signal led him to, it took everything that made him who he was. Eli stared at the silent radio in my hand. So, those voices are bait. Something up here uses them to lure people off the safe trails. We call them the horn shadows because people who've gotten close enough to see them say they have these twisted antlers that seem to be made of static like a TV with bad reception. They broadcast on frequencies that shouldn't exist, and if you follow them, you end up like Doug, or worse. We continued in silence after that, but every few minutes I'd catch Eli glancing at the radio, his brow furrowed. I understood the temptation. That voice had sounded so real, so scared. Every instinct screamed that we should help. But out here, instincts could get you killed. I thought about Doug often. We'd been friends, not close friends, but the kind of colleagues who shared beers after long shifts and covered for each other when life got complicated. He'd had a daughter, I remembered. She'd be in middle school by now. Last I heard, she still visited him at the facility every Sunday, even though he didn't recognize her. Even though he just sat there, staring at nothing, mumbling those coordinates that led nowhere. That's what happens when you follow the horn shadows. They don't just kill you. They take everything that makes you who you are and leave an empty shell behind. A warning to others. A trophy. I shuddered and pushed the thoughts away. We had a long way to go before nightfall. We reached the Alpine Basin late in the afternoon. It was a small depression between two peaks, carpeted with hardy grasses and wildflowers that somehow survived the harsh conditions. A stream trickled through the center, fed by melting snow from the peaks above. "This is where we'll camp," I said. "Good water source, natural windbreak, clear sight lines. We'll be safe here." "Safe from what exactly?" I smiled grimly. "You'll see." We set up our tents and gathered firewood. Not easy at this altitude, but I'd stashed some emergency supplies here on a previous trip. As the sun began to set, painting the peaks in shades of orange and red, I sat Eli down for another lesson. "Rule number 6, I said. If the wind suddenly stops and the silence becomes absolute, start making noise immediately. Hum, sing, talk, anything. Do not stop until normal sound returns." Eli nodded slowly. "I remember from the list. What happens if you stay quiet?" "There are things that hunt by silence. They create it, spread it out like a net. When you're inside that silence, you can't hear them coming. You can't hear anything. And if you stay quiet too long, if you let yourself get absorbed into that emptiness, let me guess, you don't come back." Got it in one. The fire crackled between us, casting dancing shadows on the rocks. Jasper lay at my feet, his eyes half closed but his ears still alert, twitching at every sound. "How do you know all this, Nate?" Eli asked quietly. "How does anyone know?" "Trial and error, mostly. A lot of error." I poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the darkness. "The rangers who survive long enough start to notice patterns. We share information, pass it down. The old-timers, the ones who've been here 50, 60 years, they know things they won't even tell me. Say I'm not ready." "Ready for what?" "I don't know. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to." We ate dinner and talked about lighter things for a while. Eli's college experiences, his plans for graduate school, memories from our childhood when things were simpler. It was nice, pretending to be normal. Pretending we weren't sitting in the territory of things that existed beyond human understanding. But as the night deepened and the temperature dropped, the mountains reminded us where we were. It started as a subtle thing. The wind, which had been gusting steadily all evening, began to die down. The crackling of the fire seemed louder somehow, each pop and hiss standing out in sharp relief. The distant hooting of an owl faded, then stopped entirely. I held up my hand and Eli froze mid-sentence. We sat there, listening to nothing. Absolute, complete nothing. No wind, no animals, no water. Even the fire seemed muted, its flames dancing in eerie silence. "Start singing," I whispered. "What?" "Anything. Now." Eli's voice cracked as he began humming, some pop song I didn't recognize, and I joined in with an old folk tune my grandmother used to sing. Our voices seemed impossibly loud in the void of silence, like we were shouting into a vacuum. Jasper was on his feet, hackles raised, growling at something beyond the firelight. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. A presence, a weight in the darkness, pressing in from all sides like the mountain itself was trying to crush us. We kept singing. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. My throat went raw. Eli's voice kept breaking, but we didn't stop. We couldn't. Finally, gradually, the world came back. Wind rustled the grass. An insect chirped. The stream burbled in the distance. We collapsed against each other, breathing hard. "What was that?" Eli gasped. "Stone-skinned giants," I said. "At least that's what I call them. They're old. Maybe the oldest things in these mountains. They move so slowly you can't see them, like glaciers made of flesh. But when they hunt, they drain all sound from an area. Creates a bubble of silence they can move through undetected." "So, we were being hunted?" "We were being tested, I think. They're curious about humans, but they're not necessarily hostile. As long as you don't let yourself get absorbed into their silence, they usually move on." "Usually?" I stared into the fire, watching the flames dance. "There was a hiker a few years back. Found him about 3 miles from here. He'd been missing for 2 weeks. When we found him, he was still alive, technically. But he was standing perfectly still in the middle of a clearing, not moving, not blinking, not breathing as far as we could tell. But his heart was still beating. His eyes were still open. What happened to him? We tried to move him, but it was like he was rooted to the ground. Eventually, we had to sedate him just to get him on a stretcher. When he woke up in the hospital, he didn't remember anything. Not who he was, not where he'd been, nothing. It was like whatever made him who he was had been. Drained out, absorbed into the silence. He still doesn't talk, just sits there, staring at nothing, like he's waiting for something." Eli shuddered. "That's horrifying." "That's why we keep singing," I said. "That's why we never let the silence take us." The third day brought fog. Not the gentle morning mist that burns off by noon, but thick, impenetrable fog that rolled in from the peaks and wrapped around us like a shroud. "We should wait it out," Eli said, eyeing the gray wall that had reduced our visibility to about 10 feet. "Can't. We need to cross the pass today, or we'll run out of supplies before we reach the ranger station on the other side. Can't we navigate by compass?" "Compass won't help us here." I showed him my compass. The needle was spinning wildly, unable to find north. The mountains do that sometimes. Too much iron in the rocks or something else. So we walked blind, following the trail more by feel than sight. I kept one hand on Jasper's collar, trusting his senses more than my own. Dogs can feel things humans can't. They know when something's wrong long before we do. We'd been walking for about an hour when Jasper stopped dead in his tracks. "What is it, boy?" The fog ahead of us seemed to thicken, to coalesce into something solid, a shape, a figure. It was human. Or it looked human, anyway. A woman, elderly, with silver glasses perched on her nose and a warm smile on her weathered face. She was wearing hiking gear that looked about 30 years out of date, canvas pack, leather boots, wool sweater. "Oh, thank goodness," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the fog. "I've been wandering for hours. I can't seem to find my way back to the trail. Could you help me?" I felt Eli tense beside me. I knew what he was thinking. Old woman, lost in the fog, asking for help. Every instinct said we should assist her, but Jasper wasn't growling. He was wagging his tail. I stepped forward slowly. "Ma'am, how long have you been out here?" She laughed, a surprisingly bright sound. "Oh, longer than I care to admit. These old bones don't move as fast as they used to." I studied her carefully. Silver glasses, warm smile, no threat in her posture, no wrongness in her movements. "Eli," I said quietly, "rule number 8. He fumbled for the paper, reading quickly. His eyes widened. "Rule number 8. If you encounter an elderly woman with silver glasses who asks for help finding the trail, assist her. She is a benevolent spirit. Helping her brings good fortune." I offered the woman my arm. "We're headed toward the pass, ma'am. Would you like to walk with us?" "That would be lovely, young man. Thank you." We walked together through the fog, the woman chatting pleasantly about the mountains, the weather, the changing of the seasons. She asked about our trip, our lives, our families. She seemed genuinely interested in Eli's plans for graduate school. "You remind me of my grandson," she said to him. "Always curious, always wanting to learn more about the world." "What happened to him?" Eli asked. A flicker of sadness crossed her face. "He grew up, found his own path. That's what the young are supposed to do." She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, more distant. "I used to hike these trails with him when he was young. Before I got lost. These mountains were our sanctuary, our sacred place." "How long have you been out here?" I asked carefully. She smiled, but there was something ancient in her eyes, something that had seen centuries pass like seasons. "Oh, a long time now. Long enough to watch the trees grow and die and grow again, long enough to see the glaciers retreat and the valleys change. But I don't mind. The mountains keep me company, and every now and then, kind souls like yourselves remind me what it was like to be alive." I felt a chill run down my spine, despite the warmth of her presence. She spoke of time the way the old man with the beard had, as something fluid, something that didn't quite apply to her in the same way it applied to us. After about an hour, the fog began to thin. Ahead, I could see the rocky slope leading up to the pass. "Oh, look at that," the woman said. "I know where I am now. Thank you so much for your help." She patted my arm gently, and for just a moment her hand felt different, lighter, less substantial than it should have been. "Be careful up there," she said, her voice suddenly serious. "Something woke up in the high peaks a few years back. Something old and hungry. You'll need all your wits about you." Before I could ask what she meant, she turned and walked back into the fog. Within seconds, she had vanished completely. "Did that really just happen?" Eli asked. "Yeah, and you should remember this day. Not everything in these mountains wants to hurt us. Some of them, I don't know. Maybe they remember what it was like to be human. Maybe they want to help. Or maybe they're just lonely." I thought about that as we began our climb toward the pass. Maybe. Loneliness does strange things to you out here. The pass was worse than I remembered. At nearly 14,000 feet, the air was thin enough to make every step feel like 10. The wind howled through the gap between peaks, threatening to knock us off our feet. Snow clung to the shadowed areas, turning the rocks slick and treacherous. And then there was the feeling of being watched. I'd felt it before, on other trips to high altitude. There's something about being above the tree line, above the world where humans are meant to live, that makes you realize just how small and fragile you really are. The mountains don't care about us. They existed for millions of years before we came, and they'll exist for millions more after we're gone. But this was different. This wasn't the impersonal indifference of stone and sky. This was attention. Focused, deliberate attention from something that was very much aware of our presence. "Nate," Eli said, his voice tight, "I think I see something." I followed his gaze to a rocky outcropping about 100 yards away. At first I couldn't make out what he was pointing at. The rocks were gray and weathered, covered in lichen, unremarkable. Then one of them moved. It wasn't a rock at all. It was a creature, massive, maybe 8 feet tall, with 4 arms that ended in long, curved claws. Its skin was the exact color and texture of the surrounding stone, perfect camouflage against the mountain. The only things that stood out were its eyes, 2 vertical slits that glowed a faint, sickly yellow. "Don't look at its eyes," I said immediately. "Rule number 7. Do you remember?" "The peak stalker," Eli whispered. "If you encounter a creature with 4 arms and stone-like skin, do not make eye contact. Its gaze induces paralysis. Walk slowly backward while looking at the ground. Do not run." "Good. Now do exactly that." We began backing away, step by careful step. The creature watched us with that alien intelligence, its head tilting slowly from side to side like a curious bird. It made no move to follow. "Why isn't it coming after us?" Eli asked. "I don't know. Maybe we're not worth the effort. Maybe it just ate. Maybe it's—" The creature let out a sound, not a roar, not a screech, but something worse. A whisper, 100 whispers, overlapping and dissonant, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Look at me. Look at me. Look at me." I felt the compulsion like a physical force, a hand trying to turn my chin upward. My neck muscles strained with the effort of keeping my gaze on the ground. Beside me, Eli was trembling, tears streaming down his face. "Don't listen," I said through gritted teeth. "Keep walking. Don't look." You want to see. You want to know. Just one glance. Just one moment. Then you can rest. Rest forever in the stone. Become part of the mountain. Isn't that what you've always wanted? To stop fighting? To stop being afraid? Just look at me, and all the pain goes away. The voice knew things. Personal things. It knew about the exhaustion I felt, the loneliness of my life, the temptation I sometimes had to just walk into the wilderness and never come back. It knew me. "Run!" I grabbed Eli's arm and sprinted, abandoning all pretense of calm retreat. We scrambled over rocks, slid down scree slopes, ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out. Finally, we collapsed behind a boulder, gasping for air. The whispers faded. "That thing," Eli panted. "It was in my head. It knew. It knew about my dad, about what happened between us." I didn't ask. Eli's father, my brother, had been a complicated man. There was pain there, old wounds that hadn't fully healed. The peak stalker had sensed that pain and tried to use it. "They feed on regret," I said, "on the things we wish we could change. It's how they paralyze you, not just your body, but your mind. They trap you in your worst memories until you're too broken to move." "How do you know that?" I was quiet for a long moment, because I almost looked once, years ago. I was alone, going through some stuff, and if Jasper hadn't knocked me down, I'd be part of that mountain now. Eli stared at me. "Jasper saved you?" He's saved me more times than I can count. I reached down to scratch behind the dog's ears. That's why rule number 2 exists. If Jasper won't go somewhere, neither should you. He can sense things I can't. He's kept me alive. We were about halfway down the mountain when I smelled smoke. Not campfire smoke. That has a pleasant woody smell that most hikers recognize. This was different, sharper, chemical. Someone's burning something, Eli said. Maybe other hikers? Maybe. But I had a bad feeling. Stay close. Keep your voice down. We followed the smell until we came to a small clearing. What we found made my blood run cold. It was a camp. Maybe 15-20 handmade tents scattered among the trees. Cooking fires still smoldering with the remains of a recent meal. Tools and supplies strewn about. Signs of long-term habitation. But no people. What is this place? Eli whispered. Rule number 12, I said quietly. If you encounter an unmarked camp in a non-designated area, do not touch anything. Do not take anything. Leave immediately and do not return. Why? A branch snapped somewhere in the trees, then another, then another. We weren't alone. Because we're not supposed to be here, I said. And they know we're here now. Walk. Don't run. Don't look threatening. Just walk. We moved through the clearing as quickly as we could without appearing to flee. All around us, in the shadows between the trees, I could see movement. Glimpses of faces, pale and dirty. Eyes that tracked our every step. These weren't supernatural creatures. These were people. Humans who had chosen to live outside of society, off the grid, in the deep wilderness. And they protected their territory with violent determination. Don't make eye contact, I murmured to Eli. Don't speak. Just keep walking. The faces in the shadows followed us, multiplying as we moved. 10, 20, 30. I could feel their hostility like a physical pressure, could sense weapons being raised and arrows being knocked. But no attack came. We reached the edge of the clearing and kept walking. The forest closed in around us, hiding the camp from view. Still, we didn't slow down until we'd put at least a mile between us and that place. Who were they? Eli asked, his voice shaking. People who don't want to be found. Some of them have been living out here for decades. They've adapted, formed their own communities with their own rules. As long as you don't take anything from them, they usually let you pass. Usually. There are stories. Hikers who wandered into camps like that and never came back. Bodies found stripped of everything useful. I shook my head. Not everything dangerous in these mountains is supernatural, Eli. Sometimes the scariest things are just people. We made camp in a small hollow beside a stream, far from the unmarked settlement. The sun was setting, and we were both exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally. The last 3 days had been more intense than anything I'd experienced in years. How many rules are left? Eli asked as we set up our tents. A few, but the most important one, I've been saving for last. Why? Because it's about the thing we might actually encounter tonight. The summit caller. Eli went still. That sounds bad. It is. Maybe the worst thing in these mountains. I sat down on a rock and took a deep breath. Rule number 13. If you see a light in the sky that doesn't move like a star or an airplane, do not follow it. If the light approaches you, close your eyes and do not open them until daylight. What is it? Some kind of entity. I don't know if it's a spirit or a creature or something else entirely. It appears as a point of light, usually around midnight. Beautiful, almost hypnotic. People who follow it are found the next morning with their eyes burned out and their bodies covered in strange symbols. Burned out? Like, literally? Empty sockets. No blood, no tissue, just gone. Like they were never there. I shuddered at the memory of the one victim I'd helped recover. The way his face had looked, the symbols carved into his skin, intricate and ancient and utterly alien. The old-timers say the summit caller is looking for something, scanning people somehow with that light, looking for someone specific. Who? No one knows. Maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe it's been searching for so long it's forgotten what it was looking for. I met Eli's eyes in the fading light. But if you ever see that light, Eli, if you ever feel drawn to follow it, you shut your eyes and you don't open them until morning, no matter what you hear, no matter what you feel. You stay blind until the sun comes up. That night, neither of us could sleep. We sat by the fire, taking turns keeping watch, talking in low voices to stay alert. Jasper lay between us, his eyes reflecting the flames, his ears constantly twitching at every sound. Around midnight, I saw it. A light, high in the sky. Not a star, too bright, too steady. Not a plane. There was no movement, no blinking, just a point of pure white radiance hanging in the darkness like a second moon. Eli, I whispered, close your eyes. Now. He didn't argue. He didn't question. He just squeezed his eyes shut and ducked his head. I wanted to look away. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to look away, but I couldn't. The light was beautiful, the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It called to me, not with words, but with something deeper. A yearning, a promise. Come, see. Jasper barked, sharp and sudden, breaking the spell. I jerked my gaze down, staring at the fire until the after-image of that light faded from my vision. When I finally risked looking up again, the light was closer. Much closer. Close enough that I could see it wasn't just light. There was something inside it. Something made of bone and brilliance, with too many limbs and a face that was more geometry than features. Wings that weren't wings. Eyes that weren't eyes. Something that existed in more dimensions than our minds could comprehend. I closed my eyes. Eli, don't open your eyes. Whatever you hear, don't open them. The light passed over us. I could feel it. Warm, tingling, invasive, sliding across my skin like invisible fingers, probing, searching. Then it moved on. We sat there, eyes closed, until the first gray light of dawn crept over the mountains. Only then did I allow myself to look. The summit caller was gone. The final day of our trip dawned clear and cold. We packed up camp in silence, neither of us quite able to process what we'd experienced the night before. As we started down the trail toward the ranger station, Eli finally spoke. How do you do this, Nate? How do you come out here day after day, knowing what's waiting? I thought about it for a long moment. Because someone has to. Because these mountains are worth protecting, even with everything that lives in them. And because... I trailed off. Because? Because I think I understand them. Not completely. I don't think any human could understand them completely. But enough. Enough to respect them. Enough to survive. We walked in companionable silence for a while. The trail wound down through pine forests and alpine meadows, past crystal-clear streams and fields of wildflowers. It was beautiful, peaceful, the kind of scene that belonged on a postcard. Hard to believe that less than 12 hours ago, we'd been hunted by something beyond human comprehension. I have a question, Eli said eventually. All these rules, all these creatures, have you ever seen anything good out here? Besides the woman with the silver glasses? I smiled. Actually, yeah. There's one more thing I should tell you about. Rule number 10. You saved one? I saved the best one. I stopped walking and turned to face him. If an old man with a long beard approaches your campfire and begins telling a story, let him finish. Do not interrupt. Do not leave. Listen until the end. What happens if you don't? Bad things. But if you do listen, if you give him the respect he deserves, he gives you something in return. What? Wisdom, answers, sometimes just a really good story. I chuckled at the memory. A few years ago, I was camping alone when he showed up. This ancient guy, must have been 80 or 90, with a beard down to his waist and eyes that looked like they'd seen the birth of the universe. He sat down at my fire without asking and started telling me about the mountains, how they were formed, what lived in them before humans came, what would live in them after we were gone. Did you believe him? I didn't know what to believe. But when he was done, he looked at me and said, "You have questions, young one. Ask, and I will answer." What did you ask? I was quiet for a moment, remembering. I asked him why. Why did these things exist? Why were they so dangerous? Why couldn't we just live in peace with them? What did he say? He said the mountains don't see time the way we do. To them, humans are just visitors, brief flickers of life that come and go like fireflies. The things that live in the deep places, the old places, they've been here forever. They don't hate us. They don't even really notice us most of the time. But when we venture into their territory, when we disturb their solitude, they react. The way we'd react to a fly buzzing around our heads. So we're just annoying to them? Something like that. Except when you swat at a fly, you don't think twice about it. And when they swat at us, I let the implication hang in the air. We reached the ranger station around noon. It was a small outpost, just a cabin and a radio tower, but it felt like returning to civilization after a journey to another world. I radioed ahead to confirm we'd arrived safely. Then we sat on the porch and ate the last of our trail food. "So what happens now?" Eli asked. "I go back to real life? Pretend none of this happened?" "That's up to you. But Eli," I reached into my pack and pulled out the list of rules. "I want you to have this." He took the paper, studying it with new respect. "Are you sure? You've earned it. And besides, I've got another copy." I tapped my head. "It's all up here. Has been for years." Eli folded the paper carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "I'm not going back, to my old life. I've already made my decision." "I know. I want to work here, in the mountains. I want to learn everything you know." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the sunshine. "You've got a lot to learn, kid. These mountains don't give up their secrets easily." "But you'll teach me?" "As much as I can." I stood up, stretching muscles that ached from 3 days of hard hiking. "Starting tomorrow. Right now, I think we both need a shower and about 12 hours of sleep." Eli laughed, a genuine laugh, the first I'd heard from him since we set out. "Deal. But, Nate, one more question." "Shoot." When that light passed over us last night, the summit caller, I felt something. Like it was disappointed. Like it was looking for something, and we weren't it. He hesitated. "What do you think it was looking for?" I thought about the old man's story, about beings that existed outside of time, searching for something across millennia, about the mountains and their long, long memory. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe one day we'll find out. Or maybe it's better if we don't." That night, back at my cabin, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything we'd encountered. The window watcher, the mimic wearing the elk's body, the horn shadows and their impossible radio signals, the stone-skinned giants and their hunting silence, the peak stalker with its whispers of regret, the off-grid community with their hostile eyes, and the summit caller, that beautiful, terrible light that had passed over us like the gaze of something ancient and unknowable. But mostly I thought about Eli. He'd changed during our trip. I could see it in his eyes, a mixture of fear and wonder and understanding that I recognized from my own reflection years ago. He'd seen the truth of these mountains. He'd felt their power. And unlike so many others who encountered that truth, he hadn't broken. He'd adapted. That gave me hope. For years, I'd been worried about what would happen when I got too old to do this job. The mountains needed someone to protect them, and more importantly, someone to protect the people who ventured into them. Someone who knew the rules. Now I had someone to pass that knowledge to. The next few weeks were quiet. I took Eli on easier hikes, teaching him the practical skills of wilderness survival, alongside the stranger knowledge he'd need to stay alive. How to read the signs that something was wrong. How to trust his instincts, even when his rational mind screamed that what he was sensing was impossible. How to keep his head when everything around him was trying to make him lose it. He learned fast, faster than I had at his age. One evening, about a month after our first trip, we were sitting on my back porch watching the sunset when Eli asked a question that had clearly been bothering him. "Nate, have you ever thought about documenting all this, writing it down somewhere more permanent than that piece of paper?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, these rules, this knowledge, it's important, life-saving, but it's just being passed down word of mouth from one ranger to the next. What if something happened to both of us? What if the chain got broken?" I'd thought about it, of course, many times. But there were complications. Who would believe it? I asked. If we published a book about supernatural creatures in the Rocky Mountains, people would think we were crazy. Or worse, they'd think we were trying to sell them a story. Maybe. But what if we didn't try to convince anyone? What if we just put it out there? Called it fiction, or legend, or folklore? Let the people who needed to know, and let everyone else think it was just stories. I looked at him, surprised by his insight. "You've given this a lot of thought." "I've had a lot of time to think." "And Nate, I keep coming back to the woman with the silver glasses. She said something woke up in the high peaks, something old and hungry. If that's true, if things are changing, then more people need to know the rules. Not just rangers, hikers, campers, anyone who ventures into these mountains." He was right, of course. Over the past few years, I'd noticed an uptick in strange occurrences. More sightings, more disappearances, more incidents that couldn't be explained by conventional means. Something was stirring in the deep places, something that had been sleeping for a long time. "All right," I said finally. "We'll document it. All of it. Every rule, every creature, every piece of knowledge we have. But we do it carefully. We don't want to cause a panic, and we don't want to attract the wrong kind of attention." Eli nodded solemnly. Agreed. That was the beginning of what would become our life's work. The list of rules grew from 13 to 20, then 30, then more. We interviewed other rangers, collected stories from old-timers, documented our own experiences with meticulous detail, and we shared it, quietly, carefully, with the people who needed to know. 5 years have passed since that trip with Eli. He works for the Forest Service now, just like he planned. Started as a trail crew member, worked his way up to wilderness ranger. He's good at the job, better than I was at his age. He's got instincts you can't teach, a sense for the mountains that some people are just born with. The list of rules has grown. We're up to 23 now, with more being added every year as we learn new things. Some of the additions came from Eli's own experiences, some from other rangers who finally started opening up once they realized they weren't alone in what they'd seen. The mountains don't change. They're still beautiful, still dangerous, still home to things that exist beyond human understanding. But we're still here too, still watching, still learning, still passing on the rules to the next generation of rangers and hikers and wanderers. Because that's the thing about the Rocky Mountains. They're older than us, stranger than us, more powerful than us. But they're also part of us. They're in our blood, in our bones, in every breath we take of that thin, cold, sacred air. And as long as there are people who understand that, who approach these peaks with respect and caution and just a little bit of fear. We'll keep surviving, one rule at a time. The complete list of rules. 1. Always close the curtains before dark. Don't look outside if you hear tapping on the glass. 2. If Jasper won't go somewhere, neither should you. Dogs sense things humans cannot. 3. If you see wildlife that isn't moving naturally, no breathing, no blinking, no natural motion, don't approach it. Don't make eye contact. Leave the area immediately. 4. If your pet tries to enter your home or campsite, verify it's really them before letting them in. Mimics can wear familiar faces. 5. If you pick up a radio signal on an unofficial frequency, turn it off immediately. Don't listen. Don't try to find the source. The horn shadows use these signals to lure victims to their deaths. 6. If the wind stops and silence becomes absolute, start making noise immediately. Hum, sing, talk, anything. Don't stop until normal sound returns. The stone-skinned giants hunt in silence. 7. If you encounter a creature with 4 arms and stone-like skin, do not make eye contact. Its gaze induces paralysis. Walk slowly backward while looking at the ground. Do not run. The peak stalker feeds on regret. 8. If you encounter an elderly woman with silver glasses who asks for help finding the trail, assist her. She is a benevolent spirit. Helping her brings good fortune. 9. Never respond to your name being called from the tree line if no one is visible. Don't follow the sound of a baby crying or monotone calls for help. This includes voices of deceased loved ones. 10. If an old man with a long beard approaches your campfire and begins telling a story, let him finish. Do not interrupt. Do not leave. Listen until the end. 11. Don't whistle outside at night. The sound attracts things that are best left undisturbed. 12. If you encounter an unmarked camp in a non-designated area, do not touch anything. Do not take anything. Leave immediately and do not return. 13. If you see a light in the sky that doesn't move like a star or an airplane, do not follow it. If the light approaches you, close your eyes and do not open them until daylight. The summit caller is searching for something. Don't let it be you.